Are you clapping for me or are you just clapping to clap?
I'm just vibing right now. I don't know about you.
It's not really.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the AFI Breakdown, or whatever the hell we decided to call it in that one Star Wars episode. Today we are talking about one of Tarantino's greatest films and his highest ranked on the AFI Top 100, and that is going to be Pulp Fiction. I'm correct on that, right? Reservoir Dogs isn't higher?
I don't think Reservoir Dogs is on there.
Oh, okay. I'm wrong entirely then. I think this is his
highest and only Tarantino film on there.
Okay, Ben, fact check us now.
Just wanted to apologize real quick to everyone out there. I know my background has just been a white wall for a long time. And sorry if the sound quality sounds terrible. We are currently in the process of moving out, which means that we'll be moving into Daniel's studio space for future recordings. Hopefully that happens not too far away. So please bear with me in the meantime. Looking forward to having some higher quality recordings and video in the future.
To back you up, I was miming moving across the country, but it was just like a pivot. But I think people got the metaphor I was going for. Okay, so I'm going to come out swinging when it comes to Pulp Fiction. I hope that's okay with you.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so Tarantino, say what you will about the guy, but I do not like it when people complain about a person and then act like their art is worse because they don't like the guy. I haven't really looked into Tarantino's controversies. I have no idea how he is as an artist or a person, but I think his films are objectively incredibly well made, and they stand out from just about anyone else out there, and they manage to be a level of stylized that is rare to see, and Pulp Fiction is such a prime example of that, where even all these decades later, these characters are just fucking cool. These philosophizing hitmen and Bruce Willis on the run from these dangerous guys and everything that goes down.
Yeah.
I just don't like that I'm seeing it becoming like cool to act like Tarantino's films aren't great when the guy hasn't had a miss. I think the most common one people dislike is Hateful Eight, but even that one, it's still an amazing film that's leagues above what most filmmakers will ever achieve. And I don't know, I wanted to come out and just say, from Kill Bill to Inglourious Bastards to Pulp Fiction to Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino's resume is not to be scoffed at. And God, the recent rewatch of Pulp Fiction, I went from thinking this was a really cool action movie to thinking it's like
so good.
One of the best action/philosophy movies I've ever seen. So that's my spiel. This movie's just cool. It's just cool. There's no other way to put it.
First of all, I want to say I love Tarantino's movies as well. And I think that one of the issues that you run into is that you kind of get these really upsetting like cults, these sort of fandom cults. And as someone who really enjoys Tarantino himself, I do also think that the sort of like fandom surrounding him can be incredibly annoying. And I think like one of the things that happened is Tarantino makes this sort of like paradigm of this beautiful movie that is like incredibly stylized and really does a lot of things exceptionally well, and it sets a tone. It like creates this new style, and then you get a lot of copycat films after that who saw it and were like, oh, you know what Tarantino did well? Gore. So we're gonna make a film that's like Pulp Fiction, except we're gonna sort of dismiss any kind of like meta or philosophical or like things that dig into relationships or monologues, any of that stuff, and we're just going to capitalize on like the one thing that we think Tarantino is doing well. And the reality is that Tarantino is doing a myriad of things well, and I think a lot of people watch his films and tend to like focus on the goriness or sort of the pulpiness, because that's literally, that's what Pulp Fiction is. It's a hyper violent, hyper sexual, and the reason it's called Pulp Fiction is very intentional.
And that's actually what I was going to try and riff off of, because I don't know if Tarantino is really handling a lot of his casting or if he has a casting director he's tight with, but consistently throughout his career, he casts people in roles where I go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's not something where I would picture them in it, but it absolutely fits who they are. Like Samuel L. Jackson, Jules, that works. But like John Travolta at that point in his career as this guy is a really weird casting.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis was an action star. He had done some romance stuff. Was this before or after Die Hard?
This was before. This is after, because Die Hard's like 89, I think.
Okay, so yeah, he had just gotten an action role.
He's already been the action star, yeah.
Yeah, and now he's playing this guy on the run who's kind of badass, but also definitely like a skeevy little coward in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's just great. Like, there's so many things. It's one of those things where it's just perfect pieces coming together, and the end result film just flows. The pacing's fantastic. Maybe one of the best introductions to a movie ever. The opening scene here is so absolutely outstanding in terms of characterization, tension, violence. Just wow. Watch Pulp Fiction if you have not recently. It really holds up.
It really holds up. I also think that I went into watching it thinking that it was a lot gorier than it was. I actually think Tarantino's films get progressively more gory. But Pulp Fiction isn't. There are some disturbing scenes, but it's not overall kind of the level of gore that I associate with Tarantino. There's only a couple here and there.
It's like he heard people thought he was gory and he's leaned into it. Because this was kind of shocking. There's definitely what I think it is his violence is very impactful in this movie. And so while it's not super gory, you walk away remembering the violence because I think he's leaned into the violence, but he still managed to keep a tactful hand with it. Where Django Unchained, the violence, it kind of plays with your emotions, and there's some scenes where it's truly horrific and you feel that, but then he'll turn it around and the people who inflicted violence have these wildly gory deaths, and so you're celebrating the gore.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and there's some of that in Pulp Fiction where it's not super detailed, but it hits you in the chest, and because you're seeing these people get your freedom, you're like, yay.
But the other thing that I sort of wanted to talk about too is that one of the reasons when we were talking about The Shining, we were talking about sort of extended universes and things being connected throughout film.
I was just about to go there as well, so I'm glad you are.
So I think that, with Pulp Fiction and with the rest of Tarantino's filmography, all happens in this kind of pulpy universe. It happens in a world where excessive violence and brutal deaths and just gratuitous everything is just sort of commonplace. And so when you move into films like Django Unchained or Inglourious Bastards or whatever, I think it actually makes a lot of sense, especially if you're going into it knowing that this is happening in the pulp universe, that there's going to be that much gore and violence, right? Because that's sort of the pretext for all of the films.
I want to get into that kind of vibe, that feeling you're talking about that goes throughout all of his films, because I think it's the strongest here. Do you think he perfected his style early on, is what I'm trying to say? Do you think he kind of just hit that note and has continued with it, or have you noticed a change into how he's handling this tone that he works with?
Yes and no. I think one of the reasons that Pulp Fiction works so well is because it's one of the few films that I think where you get a variety of characters. So they all coincide, they all share the same storyline eventually. But you get a much broader range of characters, whereas, say, with Inglourious Bastards or Hateful Eight, they're all sort of centered around Nazi Germany, whereas Bruce Willis is a boxer who, has his own storyline, and Jules and Marcellus are two people who have their own storyline. Uma's someone who has her own storyline. They all, I feel like, even though they are attached to, say, Marcellus Wallace, even though their storylines intersect with one another, I still view them all as very... as characters who could live independently in the universe, whereas when I watch some other of Tarantino's films, I see all the characters as being dependent on each other. I have a hard time envisioning them living outside.
I just disagree. No. I love when we disagree, but especially for Inglourious Bastards, because there's that loving romance story going on, and then the Nazi coming in there versus the party versus the Jew hunter, and they all intersect in a way where I found it to be very captivating. Feels like this web of stuff coming together, and for me, it felt like three entirely different movies that start from a similar initiating incident over here, and then there's these guys coming in, and then it comes back together, which I found to be almost exactly how Pulp Fiction is working. And so to me, it feels right in that same vein and just as diverse cast of characters. So I see what you're saying, but you're objectively wrong.
They're like Wes Anderson. So many people love his movies, right? Yeah. He's another person who I think has over-stylized movies, but it is not my personal cup of tea. And I
can't
think he's a great director. I think he makes good movies, but that kind of style doesn't appeal to me in the same way that Tarantino's style is, and that's not to knock Wes Anderson at all. That's not fair. I'm just, leveling with everyone.
That goes back to the balance of stylization we're talking about.
Yes.
What's funny is if I was an actor, there's maybe no director whose movies I'd want to campaign to be in more than Wes Anderson, because he's just so fun, it seems like, to be in one of his movies.
Yeah.
But sitting down and watching them, I just feel like I'm watching a movie the whole time. It never pulls me in.
Yeah.
But I wanted to take a bit of a turn here because
in
in this watch of Pulp Fiction, no one really developed for me. Everyone was just an exploration of character, except for Jules, who has a really great character evolution. He's the one guy who at the end of the movie is just like, actually, I realized I'm the tyrannical person. And while that was a badass thing I was quoting, I'm a massive hypocrite and I'm going to change my life. And I'm just sitting here like, wow. And then his partner goes off and dies because this is a non-linear story. That's the ending.
Yeah.
But it's really funny to me to see this one guy who's not really any more in the spotlight than anyone else, as he's very equal with the rest, but he's the one that Tarantino decided to make be the butterfly coming out of the cocoon. And it's the guy who starts the film murdering people.
Yeah. My camera went out.
Now we're going to cut to Noah King's Degrees of Separation from Jamie Lee Curtis, the woman he's the most down bad for.
Which for this film is 1. Jamie Lee Curtis and John Travolta worked in a film called Perfect in 1985, where they both starred as the title characters in that film. That's the degree of separation for Jamie Lee Curtis and, I don't know, Tarantino.
So we just had a long conversation about how it's more impressive if there's less degrees of separation. But I'm going to be honest, when it's 1 degree of separation, it's not impressive. It's sad. So I actually, during the intermission where you were replacing your battery, talked with Ben about how I actually think there's actually a really intentional usage of the sex appeal of the characters in this movies as well, and how that's kind of taken away from them because they're in PJs, they're covered in vomit. Like, these people who put so much effort into coming across so cool, by the end of the movie are literally standing in their underwear on the side of the road, walking out of a diner. Like, this was weird, but they're still cool, which I think is kind of a neat touch, where it's like, yeah, all their dressing was pulled away from them, but they still managed to prevent themselves from being robbed, and Jules just monologues about his character growth, and then they walk off in their little undies, like, off we go.
That's a really interesting take that I haven't heard much about, honestly. Mm-hmm. That sort of thing that you were talking about, where their coolness, their sex appeal is stripped away, at least on the surface, but it feels like they still are able to retain it. Like, at their core, that's still who they are. They're still cool people. I think that so much of what Tarantino wants to present to us and what he wants us to think of him is that he is that cool person, even though we know very much that he is not. Like, you're cool for being a star movie director. You're cool for, like, having, for just being you. That's what makes you cool, but you're not cool in the way that you write these characters who are so over the top cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it kind of goes into also Quentin Tarantino's not afraid to really hurt his protagonists. I mean, every movie he has, the protagonist kind of has that Die Hard effect where they're bleeding, they're bleeding, bloody, messed up, gone through the emotional ringer a lot of the times as well too. I mean, that's nowhere more prevalent than in, I think, Django Unchained. And I think everyone universally, it's not controversial thing to say, that's just a more interesting approach to a protagonist. Yeah. The obviously super glammed up action stars of decades past were just immediately pushed aside once Die Hard and movies like that came through, where there was a lot more brutal approach to what the brain POV goes through. And that's also meant to be handled in this movie. I think Tarantino has talked about the fact the reason Bruce Willis shoots Vincent Vega and kills him is because it's supposed to be that new age action star blowing away the super suave, like cool looking guy from the past. But I think it's interesting the fact that the super suave action star from the past gets the modern treatment. Like, he goes through overdosing and losing his cool and like having to deal with drug dealers and stuff, and he's like, ah! He's not suave.
I wonder if these characters really don't have much more depth to them than just being cool. Mm-hmm. Are they at their core just what Tarantino wanted them to be, which is just, symbolizing coolness? But when Pierre found work, the little money coming worked out where? I feel like there's so much more to talk about. I feel like we haven't really gone over the plot, which is fair. It's, it is a... What's the word for it? It's out of order.
Right.
There's a better word for that.
It's non-linear storytelling, and
Yeah,
I think we could summarize that pretty quickly. I'll handle Jules and Vincent. They are two enforcers, I think is the way to put it, for Marcellus Wallace, a big-time gangster. And is that just all Marcellus? He's just a gangster, right?
That's all that I know about him, yeah.
Okay, so they are going to collect something in a briefcase that these people have. They show up, they kill a couple of them, they take one of them with them, and on the way bringing this back, with some careless gun care, someone's brains get splattered all over the back of a car, the one person they kept alive. But then they are now in the middle of downtown LA and need to get rid of this body and bloody car. So they pull off to a nearby friend's place, and there is a whole lot of just, oh my God, we gotta take care of this and get the blood off. And Tarantino makes his probably most famous directorial cameo, I'd say. The wolf shows up. The wolf, who's this really intimidating guy who, despite how suave and smooth Vincent and Jules are, he just like outclasses them, being like an old-timey mobster guy. And he sets up a whole plan to get rid of all the stuff and take care of it, and he does. And so they end up dumping the car at a place where it'll be handled no problem. They end up going to a diner where someone tries to hold them up, and Jules is forced to open the case, and we see this guy who's sticking them up also sees what's inside, and he's like, it's really cool. And he's like, is that what I think it is? And Jules is like, yeah, you want to fucking die? And then we have a really interesting monologue from Jules where he talks about everything they've been through that day has made him, so realize and rethink the things in his life, because he accidentally killed someone in the back of a car and he dealt with these kind of bad people, and it's a rough life he's going through there. And then they walk out of the diner together and off into the sunset. But rewinding, this is a non-linear story, which means there's other things going on that tie on into this plot line. So I'm going to pass it on over to Noah to handle Bruce Willis's line.
Okay, enter Butch in a diner talking to Marcellus Wallace about throwing his next and last boxing fight. Butch then returns home to his French girlfriend, Fabienne. Butch doesn't throw the fight. Instead, he kills a man, then goes on a run, takes a taxi back to the motel where he's staying with his French girlfriend, Fabienne. Then we have a whole nother flashback to Butch being a child. Christopher Walken comes to him, his dead father's comrade in arms, passes him off an heirloom Rolex watch that means a whole lot to him. Butch and his girlfriend Fabienne are about to get on the run away from Marcellus Wallace when Butch realizes that Fabienne has forgotten his gold Rolex at the house where gangsters are now looking out for him. So he has to run back there, collect the watch. In the process, he kills Vincent Vega, runs back on his way to the motel. On the way to the motel, he runs over Marcellus Wallace in the road. Then a brutalized on-foot chase happens. Butch and Marcellus Wallace end up in a pawn shop called Zed's, wherein they are both captured, gagged, and some pretty sadistic stuff happens to them. Butch murders the two racist cowboys who are the proprietors of Zed's, frees Marcellus Wallace, who then goes medieval on someone's ass.
That term is open for interpretation.
Butch steals Zed's chopper, drives back to the motel, picks up Fabienne, and they ride happily off into the sunset.
You forget one kill.
Did I forget one kill?
Vince.
No, I said that.
Oh, I zoned out. So Vincent, throughout all of these interwoven storylines, is asked by Marcellus Wallace to take his wife out, which immediately kind of weird. Also, don't agree to do that. Don't ever take a gangster's wife out. Bad idea. Someone dating a gangster, not going to be the most stable person. Just horrible decision on Vincent's part. But Vincent decides, sure, let's do this. Because also saying no to Vincent Vega, or to Marcellus Wallace, probably not the best idea. I would still say no, though, and just leave town. I'd be like, this is a lose-lose situation. Either I'm fucked or I'm fucked, so I'm just going to leave. So he ends up taking her out, and they have a really interesting conversation at a place where apparently the premise for something within Kill Bill is also described. I disagree a little bit, but I kind of see where the inkling's coming in there. It's like kind of there and kind of not. But Mia then finds some drug-a-booze in a pocket, and she goes into the bathroom and starts snorting it, thinking it is cocaine, but it is actually heroin. So that does not go well. And Vincent has this. I'm getting this right so far, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Vincent then has to take her to someone to get help. So he takes her to his drug dealer friend, and they end up giving her a shot in the chest. And she goes in a jump scare that actually made me nearly piss myself as last time I watched it. Don't know why that affected me so much. And then Vincent takes her back and drops her off. And they're like, please don't get me killed by your boss. or your boyfriend, and she's like, not gonna hear about this from me. Cool. And we also get the famous gif of
John Travolta.
John Travolta going, yeah. So I think that kind of takes us into our final thoughts on the movie. I think I've made that do you have something else you want to say?
There's two things, because I do think early on you brought up there are maybe some controversies that should be discussed about Tarantino.
Yeah.
One, the use of the N-word in his films, and less in his films, but more in this film specifically, where Tarantino himself is the one using the N-word with the hard R. And there's like some pretty interesting backstory to that. There's a really good interview with him and Jamie Foxx on it. If you are curious and want to watch that, that presents kind of at least like an interesting take on his decision to use that word and his decision to be the one using it. But for a lot of the film, you know, up until that point, up until recently, Pulp Fiction is the film with the most usage of the F word in it. And so a lot of that, and I think in the same way...
it was Wolf of Wall Street that toppled it, right?
I think so.
Okay.
But I think the same way, you know, again, we're existing in this kind of pulpy universe, and I think, you know, Tarantino himself has said, you know, we're trying to take the power away from the word by using the word. And, you know, I think the same can be true. The same can be said sort of with that gory style of violence. Like, the more you sort of use it in like a almost for comedic effect, or almost as like a release of tension kind of way, the less you feel it as like, oh wow, this is really gratuitous, or this is really unnecessary. Does that make sense? That being said, I think that his decision to use the N-word is actually is a bad take on his part, because I don't think that the F word has the same kind of weight that the M word has, just historically, just from an American history kind of standpoint. I think that the F word like has some history to it, but I'm sorry, do you want me to say fuck instead? I was just wondering
why you suddenly were refusing to say fuck when we've been saying fuck this whole podcast, and suddenly you're like, the F word.
I don't know. The use of the M-word specifically, I think, has way more weight to it, and I think even though he's trying to do it in a way where we're taking the power away from it, I think he's sort of like neglecting some other key aspects of why maybe white people don't say that word and why everyone can say fuck, right? And so I think that particular part in the movie maybe hasn't aged well.
I think Tarantino has had examples of the N-word being used where it just makes sense for the character and context of the film. Like in Django Unchained, like Leonardo DiCaprio had to say it because that's a part of how horribly, awfully racist his character is. And so it just fits. It makes sense. Here it did feel excessive, but this is also a topic where I'm definitely of the opinion that I need to sit and listen rather than express my opinions on the matter, because it's not something I know enough about or, you know, want to say I have some kind of authoritative voice on the matter. It did definitely on this viewing kind of make me go like, that's a lot. This is quite a bit. Maybe stop. Anytime now.
Okay, but that isn't that weird though to have that kind of reaction of like, this seems like a little excessive for that, as opposed to like, you know, watching someone's head get blown off or watching them clean out blood and gut, you know, do whatever.
Yeah.
And be like, oh yeah, this seems pretty appropriate.
We're desensitized to the point where like the whole country is desensitized to the point where violence essentially means nothing. So I don't know. I'm of the opinion now where I'm like, yeah, of course I didn't react to someone's blood brains being sprayed out, because it's just like I see that all the time now. So yeah, that's kind of my general approach there. I'm still in a position of I want to sit and listen before I speak on anything.
Totally.
But that does raise an interesting point here where in terms of a female character, I remembered Mia being someone who didn't have a lot of agency, but she is actually like a very well established and motivated character here, where she is a cause of conflicts, a cause of resolutions, like she is just doing her own thing, and Vincent is essentially just trying to play catch up with what she's going along with. And I actually really enjoyed her character, and Tarantino's, you know, famously not had the best representation of women at various times, but I also think he's done extraordinarily well done female characters.
Sure.
And it's kind of an interesting inconsistency in his career, I'd say. But no, I actually really like the character of Mia this time around.
I love her character.
And she's played masterfully by Uma Thurman.
Oh, she's perfect. Yes, I'm in total agreement with you in terms of Uma's acting in this role. Like that character is one of the most believable that I see in the movie. Also, as a real quick side note, the dancing scene in the diner, is one of my favorite scenes. And so John Travolta, obviously, famously, is a really talented dancer. And so apparently Travolta taught Uma Thurman all of these like dance moves for the scene.
Really?
And so, yeah. And so they were just dancing up on the stage, and Tarantino's sitting back in his director's chair, and he would just call out different dance moves. And they would just switch to doing that dance move. And there's this really beautiful, just kind of, I just love the way they dance in that scene. It's not something that, it's not really typical, I don't think. Like when I watch them dancing, it's not what I'm expecting, but I have never found it awkward. I think it looks really neat.
I can't move like that.
It looks really neat.
This is me dancing. I think I nailed it, actually. I think I should be in that scene.
Actually, you know what? I think you should take that back. I think you do an excellent job of dancing.
So that actually kind of brings me to one of my final questions I wanted to bring in here for Pulp Fiction.
Sure.
And that is actually going to be back towards the music, but specifically how the music is used intentionally inappropriately at times. You know what I'm talking about?
No, give me an example.
So, like, there's songs playing in the background, and he's done this in Reservoir Dogs as well, where there's songs playing in the background where there's just violence, like, and he'll just put something that's like a catchy tune that's, you know, actually in the movie sometimes or sometimes not. And I really love that. And it wasn't something I was ever really noticing until this view through, where Tarantino likes to have like his climactic action going on. And then Reservoir Dogs, there's like the cutting the ear off while music's playing stuff. Well, just pop in a tune, and it's so effective because it also forever ruins that song for me every time. Like, I can't hear the song without hearing the guy's ear being sliced off in Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, there's like a really sort of like rockabilly, like jaunty music going on in the background, like immediately preceding that scene.
It feels like it's intentionally perverse.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Like almost like we're making light of this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But it comes across extra revolting because of that. You're like, oh, this is horrifying, and I'm having a good jaunty time.
Yeah. You're like, I should be feeling this conflict. You're like, this is a really weird choice to have like such upbeat music in the background. And it almost like draws more attention to the fact that something wrong is going on.
But what I want to ask, though, is do you think it's falling into Tarantino celebrating the violence, or is he intentionally trying to upset you with the contrast?
That's a tough question, because as we have discussed in this video, we know that he does both. Like, we know that he does celebrate violence, that violence is sort of like a fun topic to explore for him. And at the same time that he does want to draw attention to how fucked up some of these things are. So my gut instinct is to say we're more drawing attention to like something fucked up is happening, as opposed to, you know, we're celebrating whatever violence is going on here. That's my like gut reaction. But do you agree or disagree?
I have no idea. That's why I wanted to ask it. And I also want to pass it to our commenters. Do you think Tarantino is intentionally pointing at the violence and trying to make the juxtaposition of tone bother you, or is he celebrating? Or is it case by case, all of which are valid answers? But this does also bring me to asking you, is your camera still recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think Pulp Fiction should be remade?
Absolutely not. I do not. No way.
Me too. It's too recent. It's too perfect in what it is. You don't need to remake this one. And do you think it belongs in the AFI Top 100?
That one I'm not so sure of.
What the fuck was that? You just clicked your lips at me. Does it belong in the top 100? No.
You go first. Tell me you think it belongs up there.
I love you, Noah. You just turned into an old-timey newspaper salesman. Coming at the news, see? I think it does belong in the AFI Top 100. I think this is the first time I have said one does belong that you say doesn't. I think it hits its mark nearly every single time, and I would put it low, but I would put it in the top 100 films of all time. Cool.
Right now, I think it's sitting at about 94.
I put it actually higher than that. I think I go like 86.
Cool. Yeah, 86. Throw it out there. I think that... That's a really hard question. I should have come prepared to this. Did you not see that question coming? I don't know. It's like this is the first time this question has ever been asked of me. Can you give me like 30 seconds to think to myself for a moment? Do you have that much time of recording left? I have no idea. It's just a blinking red light, but it's still going. Okay.
We're going to say Noah's not sure, and to get the answer, you must wait for us to finish the AFI Top 100
Oh my God.
and put together our own lists, which is videos we're going to do in the future. But anyway, everyone, thank you for tuning in to this rather chaotic, messy discussion of Pulp Fiction, Tarantino's most iconic film, and I would argue possibly his best, though I do personally prefer Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in terms of enjoyment. And have a great one, y'all. I hope you are happy and fulfilled in who you are. I hope you continue to explore yourself as individuals, and of course, continue your cinematic journeys on your own, and consider our opinions nothing more than the opinions that they are. It's great to disagree. That's a long enough outro.
And damn it. Literally, all I was going to say was, I don't. I was just going to, everything that you said, I was going to be like, and I don't wish any of those things.
Cut out?
Yeah, cut out.
Ben, have a great time with comedic timing and editing that. That's fantastic. Okay, like and subscribe, everyone. Have a good one. Bye!